Well, good morning. Thank you for staying with us and welcome to the second hour of Citizen Extra. This hour, we focus on the economy ahead of tomorrow's budget reading, which, of course, is coming early this year owing to the general election in August. Let me introduce my guests in studio who will discuss matters economy, and then a little later, we'll be talking individual politics. We begin with ANC leader Musalia Mudavadi, whose party is a member party of the NASA coalition, and he, of course, is seen as one of the front runners, if you like, in that contention for the presidential flag bearer for the NASA region. Well, also joining me this morning is Nairobi Governor Kidero. We'll be talking about the budget with him and, of course, the economy and its performance. Later in the program, we'll also discuss the politics of the city with him. And also joining me are economic analyst Maurice Odor from Cyton, speaking to us this morning alongside Walter Muturi of Deloitte, and you're all welcome to the program. Musalia, let me begin with you. What is, in your opinion, the state of the Kenyan economy 4 years into the Jubilee administration?
Well, I think it's in a very difficult situation, and the thing that really comes forward at this point in time is the massive public debt, which is now close to 50% of our GDP. Now, this is a very serious situation, and it's beginning to reflect in a number of things. One, inflation is now on the rise. Secondly, we are seeing the monetary policy beginning to see signs of stress, even within how they can try and buttress the shilling, bearing in mind that there is a heavy burden of public debt there. We can see the government borrowing extremely heavily from the public, and indeed beginning to squeeze out private sector. So this, to me, is extremely serious, and the biggest challenge, and I hope Mr. Rotich will be able to come out clearly on this, is how do they intend to stem this particular issue of the unsustainable public debt. All right,
Governor Kidero, is public debt top on your list of concerns in as far as the economy's performance?
I think it is, because it bears on the government being able to meet its commitments, and I'd like to add to what Mr. Mudavadi had said, that he's worrying because even if you look at the budget that is going to be read tomorrow, the budget is at 1.7 trillion, and the revenue will be 1.7 trillion, but the budget is at about 2.6, which means that we have a budget deficit of 900 billion, and that is going to add to the 50% of the current debt as a percentage of the gross domestic product. So it's something that's worrying. And as NASA has said, is that we seem to be driving our economy on debt, and we're putting a great burden on the future generations.
All right, despite that concern, Musalia, Kenya's economy is still averaging about 6% growth, while the global figures are at about 3%. Does that not point to something being done right by this administration?
I think we should not be misled by statistics. I think what is important here is that what do these statistics really entail? What component of the economy is feeling this? The level of unemployment in this country is extremely high. You would put it that out of every 10 young people who are possible and can be employed, we are getting only maybe 3 getting a job. Now, that is extremely serious. When you look at the cost of living, particularly for the low-income people, it is extremely difficult. And therefore, when we are fed with statistics to say that the economy is growing, but you're not seeing a commensurate level of people getting jobs, the poverty indexes are rising, by the way. These are the statistics that are not being brought out. But if you look at the poverty indexes in this country at this point in time, they are on the rise.
Governor, as you run the country's largest economy in terms of counties, I would say the hub of economic performance in the country, do you feel that perhaps, do you feel a slowdown as governor?
I have 2 points. One is, I mean, we have 1.2 million people who get into the job market every year. The formal market only creates 50,000 jobs. So we have 1.15 million people who do not get engaged in productive enterprises. And of this 1.15 million people, 800,000 of them end up in Nairobi. Of course, I mean, that adds stress to already our overburdened system. The second thing is Nairobi is 60% of the gross domestic product. There doesn't seem to be deliberate policy. Even, I mean, I was looking at the budget policy statement, whose theme is consolidating consolidating the economic growth in the face of global slowed demand.
Right.
I didn't seem to see any deliberate policy that one would consolidate or support Nairobi as the home of 60% of the gross domestic product. I didn't see any specific policy to assist in creating more jobs for the 1.15 million people who come into the job market every year.
All right, and I suppose we can expect tomorrow more detail in terms of how the government intends to do that. You've talked about its theme, consolidating economic gains in an environment of subdued global demand. We'll get into what you think would be consolidating those gains. But let me get to my economic analyst this morning. Maurice, I'll start with you. You've heard what the two gentlemen have said. Frankly, because it's a political season, one can expect that we wouldn't be hearing the most rosy of projections from them. What is your own assessment in terms of Kenya's economic performance and the last 4 years under the Jubilee administration?
Thank you. If you look at the performance for the economy over the last 4 years, of course, the GDP growth rate for the year 2016 came at a very impressive figure, about average of 5.8%. The budget is on assumption growth of about 5.9%. Again, given that we're moving to electioneering year, it's an ambitious growth projection given the current status of the economy, given the number of layoffs we're seeing mostly from the financial sector. The performance of private sector is still dismal, lower than what's expected to be. And again, if you look at now, the economic growth has mainly been driven by government infrastructure development, and what we need to come out clearly is the policy action in terms of how to ensure that we improve on the contribution of the private sector, because actually that's really the heartbeat of the economy, the Kenyan economy. Going forward, look at again domestic borrowing, again some levels of concern. Look at again the appetite for foreign debt again remains a key concern, and we are now moving to a level where the cost of living is very high. Talking of inflation, it's about 9%, again above the CBK upper target. And what we are likely, what we expect to see from is just the policy mechanism transforming the growth now to improve the Kenyan living standard, and again ensuring that now we we improve on the contribution of the private sector performance into the economic growth, supposed to be mainly driven by government infrastructure projects. All
right, what are your assessment?
I think what has been happening is that the economy has seen different shocks. We can look at the ongoing drought, which has given a blow to agriculture, which is a ministry of this country. We've seen the global economy that also has slowed down in as much as Kenya possibly has had some bright spots here and there. And with global economy experiencing some difficulties, then you will find that some of our sources of revenue, like the remittances, have not been growing with the rate that we've seen in the past when the global economy was doing well. So that has had an impact on the economy, and that's why you can see, in as much as the projected growth for this financial year, the coming financial year, it's more or less where it was in the current financial year. It's about 5.9, down from about 6. So that gives you an indication that the economy is not doing as well as it should be doing.
All right. Musalia, let me come to you because you've talked about the question of public debt, which has largely been occasioned by the huge borrowing in order to finance these mega infrastructure projects. And as far as this administration is concerned, there's no other way to grow the economy unless you have the macroeconomic fundamentals being stable. And that's why these mega projects are so important to the Jubilee administration in order to be able to create more jobs, to open up other parts of the country. As someone who has wanted to run for president, what is your own thinking in terms of fiscal policy? What is it you would make as priority projects? For Jubilee, it's clearly been infrastructure.
First of all, let me just say this, that investment in infrastructure is important at any one time of a nation's life. But what we have been dealing with in Kenya is that the level, are we getting value for money? That's basically the thing. Because some of the costs and the projects and the wastage we are seeing around these projects is what is worrisome. And this is what is raising the concern that most people now have come to realize really exists. Now let's take, for example, right now there's now an issue that has just emerged, and it's in the print media, around the Kenya pipeline. The extension that was supposed to be there, but there's something that is coming out, now it's in the public domain, that again, the cost of doing that pipeline, the second pipeline, has seriously been inflated, and there's wastage. So as we go forward, the NASA government would be looking critically at the issue of how do you deal with wastage? How do you make sure that Kenyans get value for money, even if we are investing in some of these projects? Secondly, if you just to look at the drought-related areas, when you look at the budget that has been associated with the Ministry of Water or the Water Department, it's massive, massive. But when it comes out to seeing whether it is having that serious mitigating impact in the ASAL areas, we are yet to see this. So these are some of the concerns where we would have to really make sure that the investment in some of these areas is really focused, and we cut out wastage.
But from the ministry level, because I don't want to lose what you've said about wastage, how would one curb it? We've had some of these projects having to be retendered, etc. At a policy level, what would you do to curb wastage?
You know, when you look at it, some of these projects, the tendering has not been particularly transparent. So that is one thing that we really need to refocus on and make sure that the tendering process is genuinely competitive. This has not been happening. Secondly, when you look at some of these projects, a lot of them are being driven by commercial borrowing, not concessional borrowing. Now, these are areas that we would have to refocus. Otherwise, the pressure on the Kenyan people is going to be unbearable.
All right, but you still seem to hold the perspective that infrastructure growth is key. Governor Kidero, what are your thoughts? What should be priority projects? And if you could give us the Nairobi context, because this is really the county where all eyes are on in terms of attracting foreign investment into Kenya. There's a lot of concern in terms of the joblessness in the capital and the capital's competitiveness against other African capitals. Where should the priority spending be, not only for the entire country, but in particular for Nairobi?
I think infrastructure is very, very important. If you look in the past, maybe 4, 5, 6 years ago, Nairobi as a city, as a destination for conference, we started losing because it took you longer to get from the airport to the city center than maybe to fly to Johannesburg. So we lost lots of conferences to Rwanda. Actually, I mean, Rwanda grew probably as a result of non-functioning of our transport system. I mean, we've identified 9 transport corridors, and there's investments, and it's important that these are completed. We have fairly heavy traffic. We register about 120,000 cars a year, having grown from 4,000 cars in the mid-60s to now we have about 700,000 vehicles, with roads network increasing from only 1,200 kilometers to about 2,200, 2,000. So I think that the investment on infrastructure is key for sustainable growth. The second, I think, is...
So would you then agree that the public debt issue is one that may need to be resolved in time if infrastructure is that critical?
I think we can still invest in infrastructure and reduce waste. Take, for example, I mean, the one area of waste is unutilized labor, especially in the civil service. I've just seen part of the budget statement that we are budgeting 100 billion as salary increments for public servants, whilst we know that the effective labor by the public service is probably less than 50%, and I take Nairobi City County as an example. We inherited from the city council and former city council and the central government a workforce of 17,000. We've now brought it down to 11,000, but an analysis of productivity, probably we need only 6,000 to 7,000. So I think instead of, we need to look at waste in that particular area. The second waste is in governance. And Mr. Mudavadi has just mentioned one. And studies have shown that 40% of total budget is wasted due to corruption and lack of proper governance. And I think my colleagues from Walter from Deloitte and Morris from Cyton probably would add on that. So I think we need to look what we do to get value for money, and where do we put our best investments.
Let me bring in Morris on that. I don't want to
could I just add one thing, because I think this is very important. I think devolution has made a difference to Kenya. You travel across the country, you see what devolution has done. And if you come, the total amount being given out this year for devolution is about 20 billion, 327 billion, Parliament having refused Senate's proposal of 352. So the per capita provision is about 8,000 shillings per head, while Nairobi is only 3,000 shillings per head. Yet Nairobi is the heartbeat, and is the lungs, and is the brains.
Yes, and I was expecting you to make a pitch for more of those funds to counties, and that's why I was holding you on that thought, because I want to talk about the role of county governments in terms of growing the economy, etc., and the challenge that national government has given you to just generate your own revenue. You have the ability to do that. But let me get comments from Morris on that, because both political leaders are bringing out the issue of wastage in terms of public debt and how that's affecting public debt. And in particular, Governor Kidero has also brought out to the part of productivity on the civil service. What policy interventions can this administration bring forward that would make a significant dent in the public debt in as far as wastage is concerned?
If you look at over the last 4 years, especially in terms of debt, both domestic and foreign debt accumulation, we reached historical high over the last 4 years. And the last 4 years is again the year that we've seen Kenya going for global borrowing in terms of significant global borrowing in terms of Eurobond. And again, you've seen a significant drop in private sector credit growth. And really, private sector, you are not financing them. There's no way economy will do very well. There's no way economy will create jobs, because really private sector that contributes significant productivity towards the economic growth. Where we are going now, we are saying now borrowing is not bad, and in fact borrowing is one of the mechanisms of financing infrastructure projects. But how are we supposed to do it where we are failing as Kenyans? Also to ensure that at least we are getting value of what we are doing. We ensure that at least the degree at which we are borrowing, we are not even stifling private sector. And again, how we are going for the global borrowing, we are not opening economy to external shocks. Because if you look at Kenya nowadays, where we are, whatever happens to the dollar, we have to be very well, because at the end of the day, we have debt that we are servicing in terms of dollar. Going forward, infrastructure projects are very important for economic growth in terms of opening road networks and transport networks, in terms of opening different parts of the country for trade and also for other economic activities, in terms of even mechanization of agriculture to ensure that there's increased food production to feed the nation, in terms of ensuring that there are health facilities so people can accept quality health services, in terms of even coming up with good classroom for students also, so at least so that we talk about ensuring that students have access to quality classroom first before we even talk about giving them laptops, because as we know, there are some parts of Kenya that again students are still learning under trees.
Right.
So you wonder how you can be given a laptop and you are sitting under it. So we have to ensure that we move with the key essential things first so that others could follow. And again, we borrow with more discipline and ensure that there's a strong approach in terms of public finance management.
Almost sounds like you're saying a little bit of common sense borrowing, if that's what you're talking about in economic growth. Also, let me bring you to the conversation because Maurice has talked about, you know, the infrastructure projects vis-a-vis what is really needed. And what we continuously hear from the public is that while there's macro growth, there's no micro growth. You know, food prices still far too high, unemployment, etc. How should government prioritize, you know, what it wants in terms of, you know, getting the nation really cruising into the, if you like, middle income economies, vis-a-vis the very real need that, you know, Kenyans' needs still remain very basic?
But that's a good question because it brings into focus the kind of expenditure that should be prioritized by the government. It should be the kind of expenditure that's visible to the ordinary mwananchi. The ordinary mwananchi need to see the expenditure that's put by the government. There is some trickle effect in their pockets. Let's say, for example, if they feel the measures being taken by the government possibly will lead to some additional taxation or the cost of goods and services that they consume go higher, then they'll feel they are not getting value from the government. So there is need to prioritize on aspects or the sectors of the economy where they'll feel the impact more. We are looking at agriculture is one of them because 80% of this country depends on agriculture. Then we should be concentrating much on that. And my colleagues here have mentioned about infrastructure. It's another visible aspect or sector of the economy that can easily be seen. And if there is if the mwananchi can move from point A to point B with ease, the cost of production or the cost of moving the goods from point A to B reduces, then they'll be able to feel the effect. If they go to the hospitals and the costs are coming down, then they can feel the effect. If they go to the schools and they find that the school, maybe the service that they receive from the school, the costs are coming down, then they'll feel the impact, the impact of the government spending. So we need to also focus on aspects that are beneficial to the mwananchi and the ones that are visible for the moment, and we look at also in the medium term and the future, so that we benefit now and also going into the future. Musalia,
let me come to you with that. What is the NASA position in terms of, if you like, common sense spending that needs still remain very basic, and you need micro growth as much as you do need the macro? What would your own rating be of the administration's